Hi, I'm Gleaves, Whitney, and I receive a number of questions on the American presidency in a column called Ask Gleaves, and I wanted to answer one of those today. This question comes from Lisa Pierce, who is an English and Education major at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. She asks, if Hillary Clinton loses the race to be the Democratic nominee for president, do you think she will support Barack Obama? Well, here's my answer, Lisa. At this point, no one can answer your very intriguing question. Hillary Clinton pledges to remain in the race until her party chooses a nominee. But that nominee will almost certainly be Barack Obama, and no one knows how she will react to losing. Some pundits suggest she will energetically support Obama to reunite the party and help Democrats defeat Republican John McCain in November. Others see a little bit more Machiavellian scenario unfolding. They say Hillary Clinton would secretly prefer John McCain to win the general election so that she can have another shot at the Democratic nomination in 2012. If that's the case, don't expect her to campaign enthusiastically for her rival. Both Bill and Hillary Clinton have shown themselves perfectly capable of using the race card when it's to their advantage and engaging in what they themselves call the politics of personal destruction. Now, of course, they did not invent that term, the politics of personal destruction. That term comes from the 1987 campaign to have Robert Bork confirmed in the U.S. Senate for the Supreme Court. That's where that term comes from. But the Clintons famously used that term again and again in the late 1990s, especially during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, politics of personal destruction. Whatever the outcome of this year's Democratic primary, American history provides plenty of precedents for high drama. In numerous past races, loyalty to party was hardly a given, nor was loyalty to presidents. Take the election of 1800, when something occurred that has never happened since. The sitting vice president, Thomas Jefferson, challenged the sitting president, John Adams, for the White House. The contest was so close and so filled with intrigue that it was thrown into the House of Representatives. Nevertheless, it was a watershed event for the nation since Jeffersonians kept control of the White House for the next quarter century, ironically until John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, was elected president about 24 years later. Fast forward to the Civil War. Republican Abraham Lincoln decided to fire one of his generals, George McClellan, because he had not been aggressive enough in pursuing General Robert E. Lee and the Confederates. In 1864, McClellan sought revenge by challenging his former commander-in-chief for the presidency. Running as a Democrat, McClellan was able to get 45% of the vote, the popular vote, to Lincoln's 55%. So it's a fairly serious challenge for a non-politician. The election of 1912 contained quite a twist. Republican Theodore Roosevelt had been president during the first years of the 20th century, 1901 to 1909. His hand-picked successor, William Howard Taft, occupied the White House after Roosevelt left office. But Roosevelt became so disappointed in the Taft presidency that he ran against his former colleague and friend in 1912, not on the Republican ticket, but on a new party ticket, the Bull Moose Party. Remarkably, TR got more votes than his erstwhile friend. It was the only time in U.S. history that a third-party candidate received more votes than the incumbent. However, of course, both Roosevelt and Taft lost to Woodrow Wilson in 1912, and Wilson was able to be in the White House for the next 8 years. So the division in that case had severe consequences. The 1960 race was a curious affair. The retiring two-term president, Dwight Eisenhower, did not endorse even his own vice president, Richard Nixon, who was seeking the White House that year. Only late in the contest did Ike change his mind and campaign for Nixon, but perhaps too late. The president's belated support may have cost his vice president the election. In one of the closest races in U.S. history, Kennedy garnered 49.7% of the vote to Nixon's 49.5% of the vote. It was that close. In recent decades, there have been notable instances when candidates belonging to the same party have refused to support each other. Indeed, 3 times they have mounted a serious challenge to their party's own president. It happened to Republicans in 1992. Incumbent George H.W. Bush was running for a re-election, but many conservatives had been disappointed by the president's performance. Republican stalwart Patrick Buchanan indicted the Bush administration for being merely Reagan light. and decided to run against him, and after winning 3 million votes in primaries and caucuses, Buchanan withdrew his candidacy and gave tepid support to Bush. His culture war speech at the party convention in Houston symbolized the deep divisions between GOP conservatives and GOP moderates. Bush lost decisively to Bill Clinton the following November. Something similar happened to Democrats in 1980. President Jimmy Carter, running for re-election, headed an administration that was widely perceived as feckless. Democratic Senator Edward Kennedy decided to challenge the vulnerable incumbent. On the eve of the convention, Carter had a Gallup poll favorable rating of only 21%. 21%, the lowest percentage any president had gotten since polling began by Gallup in 1936. At the party convention in August, Carter got the support of 2,129 delegates on the first ballot, Kennedy 1,146 delegates. Democrats left that convention with a party divided, and Carter was badly beaten in the November election by Ronald Reagan. Speaking of Reagan, I should mention that the actor-turned-politician had a considerable impact on the 1976 election, when sitting President Gerald R. Ford sought the White House for 4 more years. At the nominating convention in Kansas City, Reagan came within a handful of delegates of toppling the incumbent. The Republican Party was deeply divided. It had been suggested that Reagan's lukewarm campaigning for Ford that fall contributed to Ford's narrow defeat by Jimmy Carter in November. Ford was the first sitting president in 44 years to be rejected by voters at the polls. The upshot for 2008? If Hillary Clinton decides not to support Barack Obama, or gives him only lukewarm support, then John McCain might become the 44th President of the United States of America.